Yeah, yeah, you betcha. It's moving on over. Super. We've got the stream started and just going to start, of course, the recording as well. We've got it. Oh my gosh. Hello, everyone, and welcome to A Medium's World, where this evening I have the absolute pleasure of interviewing one of Canada's favorite all-star mediums, Sean Leonard. Oh my gosh, Sean, I know that you have had an incredibly busy day, and I am truly grateful for the chance for you to take time and to meet with us here tonight and the chance to have this conversation. I am meeting you for the very first time. I actually had the pleasure of being in Phoenix, where I was in the audience when you and John Holland were on stage. And I was just, of course, I'm always in awe and amazement when conversations with the spirit world are taking place. And I just really, really thank you so much for the work you're doing. And of course, the chance to have this conversation with you.
Well, thank you for having me here, Bonnie. I appreciate it. And I'm really happy that you were able to see me in Phoenix and see me with John. And, so that's
Yeah.
super awesome. I mean, that was my first time in a live audience with Hay House. So it was kind of very cool to be able to do so. I did two things. I taught a course, not really a course, just there was a teaching for an hour and a half. And then I did 2 hours of readings with John Holland on the evening of the same day. And it was just an amazing experience.
Yeah.
And being from Canada, I'm fairly well known in Canada. I tour across Canada in different venues, etc. in Canada, but my audience reach in the US is pretty limited. And when I was doing my sessions down in the US, even though I was kind of filling in for Kyle Gray because Kyle
Right.
had some, issues with his mom in regards to her health and such, and he wanted to stay home in England to be with her. So they said, Sean, can you fill in Kyle Gray's spot? I'm like, let me look at my calendar. Yeah, I think I can do it. So I think it's empty. I can do this. Yeah, I
I
can
can
do
fit
it.
it in. I can do it.
Yeah.
I can do it. Oh
So
my
I
gosh.
did it and I walked around pretty much, when I first went in, I don't even think the volunteers that were there knew who I was. It was kind of strange because, in Canada, when I do an event, I mean, people know who I am, but
Well,
down there,
every
it's a,
right. And
it's a
here
whole
in
different
Canada,
ballpark.
for those people who are tuning in here in Canada, of course, Sean has a series on APTN called Spirit Talker. He's a published author. And so, I mean, I've been watching your series for the last few years. And so, of course, being able to see you, there. And like you said, here in Canada, you're very well known. And I love that you had the chance to take your presence to the States because you guys definitely helped a lot of people that night in the audience.
Yeah, I think it was amazing. I mean, me and John really clicked too. We're really good
Yeah.
buddies, and we chit chat back and forth here and there. And originally, like way back in the day, like I had the opportunity to tour with John, and I think it was 2016, so a little while ago, like six
Yeah.
years ago. And we did two events together. We did one in Halifax and one in Moncton, New Brunswick, and we just kind of clicked. And I think he loved the work I was doing and how I was approaching it, and so it was the first time since then that I got to be on stage again with John.
Amazing.
And I think we're both pretty humorous and funny, and I
Yeah.
think
Yeah. Definitely. Yes.
despite the heaviness of the subjects of the energy that's coming through in regards to loss, mediumship doesn't always have to be heavy. It can be, you give the messages of validation, but there's also times to inject humor and have humor, and even
Yeah.
for God's sakes, the spirit world will inject humor, and
Absolutely. Right.
you just go with it, and I think it was a great experience for me, and like I said, I originally when I went down there, I walked in, the volunteers were like, and you are, I was like, well, I'm Sean Leonard, I'm on the poster. Like, oh, so you are. And then after I was done, I was like having volunteers fight over my spot. And then I literally go to the bathroom. And when I came out, there was like 10 people waiting for me to come
Oh
out.
my gosh.
And then
Wow.
I talked to those 10 people, 10 more would line up behind them. Like it was like my whole world just changed at the I Could Do It conference, with the Hay House audience in
Of
in that
course.
event.
Of
And so I
course.
think my reach of being able to connect with people in a larger audience, especially in the U.S. market through Hayos, is going to, help me get out there a little bit more and share the teachings I have. And so I'm really happy about that.
Yeah, yeah, and you should be. You truly should be. It was like I said, it was a phenomenal night, and I really love what you say too, because there is mediumship is a heavier. I mean, it's heavy. We're dealing with people's losses. Their hearts are broken, and they're trying to cope and move forward. And then to be able to bring in the laughter and to bring in that sense of humor, even from the spirit world, that is just as healing as the tears. And it really helps to keep it even easier, I think, for us as mediums when there's a little bit more lightness and we can play a little bit in that energy as well. So yeah, I really resonate with what you say. So Sean, again, I would love people to get to know you. I think pretty much everybody in Canada does, has a pretty good pulse on who you are. But there are, of course, people tuning in here from around the globe. And I love that I have the chance, of course, to introduce you or introduce them to you and vice versa. I would just really love to share a little bit in terms of what your journey has been like. Were these gifts with the spirit world something that you kind of were open to as a child? Is it something that came forward to you later in your life? Exactly did this unfold for you?
Well, I think, we're all connected to spirit when we're young. I don't think there's any person that steps into this physical life and is not connected. I feel like we all come from spirit. We've stepped into the human form for an experience and, to be here to fulfill our purpose, etc., until we journey back home again. But and as time goes, you become a little bit more disconnected or more, I'll say more ingrained in the world, like in the earthly world of our physical form and everything that we're surrounded in regards to the physicality of things, because that's our experience. But, as a young person, I had many experiences that I wouldn't say, hey, I was a spirit talker or medium back then,
Right.
but I had many spiritual experiences that were just really cool and just oddly, uniquely different. And I thought were just kind of like woo woo, kind of superstitious type. For one, it'd be like my great grandparents visiting me when I was young, and, my mom, telling me that they just loved me and spending time with me. And I thought it was, well, I guess this is normal. I mean, spirits showing up to visit me when you're small, trying to sleep in your bed is a normal part of life. And I was actually a little startled because I could hear these people in my room chit-chatting and whispering, and so I'd make my mom put night lights on because I couldn't see them that well if the night lights were on. And then I'd wake up and my night lights would be off, and I have no idea why. Like, why would my mom come turn my night lights off? Like night lights were using a lot of electricity, right? But my
Right.
mom was like,
Right.
trying to save electricity on night lights. And I remember another really kind of cool experience being young. And this wouldn't be in my book, but this is a little bit of a different story. But I had a couple of Mi'kmaq friends that were hanging out with me in Nova Scotia, and I remember going up on the hill behind my house, up in the where the trees are, and there's just a big field overlooking a kind of a valley in Elmsdale, Nova Scotia, and I would speak to the wind. And I don't know if we all did that or not did that. I remember I was talking to my Mi'kmaq buddies, and I said, listen, I said, I can make the wind blow. And I would just speak to the wind. I said, wind, I call upon you to blow. And then the wind would pick up and start to blow. And then I'd say, okay, well, you need, wind, you need to calm down or die down. And the wind would slow down. And they're like, I don't know what the hell you're doing, but it's getting weird. I didn't even know what I was doing. I was just like,
Right.
I was just playing.
Ah,
And it was maybe it was a coincidence, who knows? Or maybe we're more powerful than we realize, and we just, haven't really, attempted things like that before. But it was like I was always exploring and trying to understand spirit. And, you know, another really profound memory that I have, and this is in my book, but I used to be able to kind of go to sleep and leave my body, and I used to be able to fly around my neighborhood. And I know a lot of people this has happened to. I don't think this is like me only experience. I feel like
right.
everybody's astral traveled when they're young and they're out playing in the neighborhood with their friends or neighbors or their imaginary friends or their spirit guides. That, I would say that your imaginary friends are probably your spirit guides. And
Exactly.
then right? And then I got to experience different levels of energy in a sense. I was like playing as a kid and understanding that even though when I went to sleep, I wasn't contained in this body anymore. I could go out and wander around the neighborhood. And it was always never like day, and it wasn't really night. It was kind of dusky all the time. It was like it was still light enough to see. And I didn't see any people. There was houses and all the telephone poles and everything was there. But I'd get out there and I could fly around pretty much. And I wouldn't go too far because it was out of my comfort zone. But I would
Right.
stay, within the vicinity of my where I was. And then at some point, as I aged through life, I wasn't able to fly anymore. It was like I remember very clearly being on the hill where I lived, and there's a dirt road going down, and I actually literally ran down the hill, flapping my arms and trying to get like air,
Trying to
like I
get
was a
some
bird or
airtime.
something.
Yeah, you're right.
And you know what? It did work a little bit. I actually floated up, and then it would float back down to the ground. It was like my conscious physical mind was interfering with my spirit about what I was able to do. And
Yeah.
as I aged, I wasn't able to do that too much at all. And it was a really cool experience. And I remember my first spirit experience was in this place. And it was a lady that looked from a very like old time period, that was wearing like a Victorian style dress. She had an old hat on, and she was holding this umbrella as she floated through the air above the telephone poles. And I tried to talk to her because she's the first person I've ever seen in this place. And I talked to her, and she just literally stuck her nose up and just kept on flying. And I feel today she was probably like a spirit that's still hanging around the earth, and based on her period of clothes. And she wasn't too into talking to me, and that's okay. But I realized there was spirits in this place. It wasn't, I hardly seen anybody, but she was one of the first people. And then I was able to kind of like have greater understanding of levels of energy. And as I grew and connected with spirits and different levels of energy through my life, I started to understand that just like in life, just people even can be in different levels of energy. We can be lower energy. And some people you may see living on the streets very depressed, or have mental illness or alcoholism or drug addictions, etc. And they're stuck in a type of like mentality of like lower level energy that they're not able to kind of find their way through. Doesn't mean that they won't find their way through at some point, but some people are struggling a little bit harder than others. And like spirit, when you leave this physical form, there's different levels of energy from which we can go. I don't think we're going to like fly up to the clouds or anything like that and hang out in the clouds. Maybe we are, and I don't know. But I do
Right.
know that I've met different spirits as I aged, from my spirit guides to the Mary Poppins lady to, different people, that I realized there was different levels of energy that people were vibrating at, or their frequency was at. And I thought it was just, so as I got older, I explored that more. I wanted to learn more and understand more. I wanted to understand why there was people hanging around the property, or why most people weren't hanging around the property. They had moved on, right? And the different energies, and even the way they communicated was different. Even their ego and their personality was still very entrenched or intact with the people that were still hanging around their property, as opposed to people that had moved on into a high level of energy, like the spirit world or the light, or the other side, whatever word you want to use. Or in Catholic terms, it could be heaven. But I mean, it's all the same place, no matter what
Right.
belief you have. We're all going, we're all coming from the same place. We're going to return to the same place. I think it's our humanistic mind that has developed belief systems, in a sense, to kind of help us bridge the gap between here and there. And it's just our way of just trying to identify all that. But we're, no matter what culture or faith or you are, I mean, there's a connection to the afterlife and the spirit world and all that. But it wasn't really until my 20s that I started to really open up. And it's because I started to go on a spiritual journey. I had a visitation from my father when I was like 16 years old, and he told me some things, and I saw him in the light, and it was very profound. But he even mentioned to me that I would be helping people, serving people. And I thought, okay, whatever, my dad's crazy. Like, I'm not going to be helping
Right.
people.
Right. I mean, really, and that's just it. At 20 years old, I mean, sometimes even at, my age, you still, I go, what does this even look like? But to understand within the naivety of that age, what that could represent or what it meant,
Oh,
I mean, understandably, it's like, yeah, okay, dad, whatever, you're crazy. Got it.
right. I mean, what do you mean I'm going to be helping people? This is silly.
Right. Right.
And he didn't even tell me really how I was going to be doing it. He just said that I would be doing it. And, him leaving my life was an integral part of that. And
Hmm.
he showed me the light, and he helped me see the other side and feel and touch the space from which we have all come from. And I
Yeah.
remember it to this day, like clearly how profound that was. And I realized that at that age of 16, that even though we're in the world living our lives, fulfilling our purpose, whatever that may be, that this world wasn't the reality of things. This is a place that we've come to kind of play and learn and grow and experience. And so I did that very well. I said, okay, well, I'm going to step into that fully. I'm just going to be within the world and live my best life that I can. But it was not as deeply connected to spirit until I was in my 20s, and I started to have more, let's say I became more spiritual. I
Right.
started to walk a more spiritual path in life. I started to, speak with spirits. I started to meditate more, and I started to do lots of meditation. I remember downloading meditation after meditation when this is when the internet first came out, right? And I remember getting different meditation stuff. And there was a guy named Dick Suppin, and who was a hypnotist, and he was giving hypnotist stuff. And I was downloading that, and I listened to it almost every night for hours, just different meditations and visualizations. And here I didn't know, but I was inadvertently like training my mind to be able to receive messages and visualize better, and to help me to receive messages at some point in my life that I didn't even anticipate. It wasn't
Right.
like I set out to say, hey, I'm going to be a medium or a spirit talker.
I said the other night on one of the other conversations, it wasn't like, I graduated from high school and this was like my destined what I said, oh, when I grow up, I really want to be a medium. I want to go out and do this work and do readings for people. Like, I don't know if there's anyone who says that. I mean, maybe nowadays, as things are starting to become more mainstream and more vastly understood, there is possibility with it. But I don't think any of us ever have this on the top 10 of what we plan to do for careers.
No. And then it just kind of unfolded that way, it was like universally guided. Obviously, my dad knew what was going on even when I was 16 years old. He knew that I had a purpose that I hadn't seen yet, and it
Right.
was going to
Well,
unfold or reveal itself in time.
right. And so what was the turning point for you, Sean? Like what was that catalyst that said, okay, I need to use this connection to the spirit world to help other people? What was that turning point for you?
Well, it was because I started a spiritual path, and I started to, I didn't want to say, like, I didn't want to pray and say, our Father or who art in heaven. I wanted to just have
Yeah.
conversations with the spirit world.
Yeah.
And again, meditation. So I was like speaking with spirit. I was like a receptive to spirit and such. And then I started to become more like intuitive, let's say, more like connected. And I would go to my ex-wife's work. In the book, it's a little bit different because I say it was like a friend's, and it was at like a coffee shop or something like that, a restaurant. But it was really my ex-wife, and she worked at Montana's in Calgary. And I would go to Montana's, and for whatever reason, I was always waiting for her to get off work, so she'd give me free food, which was awesome. So I would just sit around and just eat food and just look at people and just kind of vibe them out for whatever reason. I had nothing better to do. So I just said, well, and then I would get a vibe for people. I would just say, well, that guy feels like, he might be a drug dealer, right? Or that guy, I don't trust him. I feel like he's probably like stealing money or something. And, that couple, wow, there's definitely a connection between those two people. And so anyway, I told my ex-wife, I said, I told her about the people, and she goes, "You're crazy. I mean, they're married to different people. That guy's father's a minister, and etc." And I'm like, and I thought, well, yeah, well, I wasn't really serious. I was just kind of doing it as a fun thing. And then within a week or a little over a week, she caught the couple kissing in the kitchen. The guy got fired for stealing money. The guy got busted for dealing drugs. It was just like bing, bam, boom. And she came home and she said, "How did you know that?" I said, I really didn't know anything. I just was like having fun and just vibing people out for, just seeing what I picked, sense from them, right? I wasn't really being serious. And she goes, well, I've been telling somebody at my work named Jen Syme about you. And she's really interested. She's really into psychics and mediums and such. And she thinks that you might have some ability. You just don't know it. I'm like, okay, whatever. And she says, well, she's coming over on Sunday, and you're going to do a little session with her. You're going to like get, vibe her out and such. I'm like, what do you mean I'm going to vibe her out? I ain't going to vibe anybody. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. And it was really, that was like a moment that I never planned, that just kind of showed up in my life, and she came over. And so I started to kind of vibe her out. Like, I didn't really know what I was doing. I wasn't trained. I wasn't taught anything. Nobody said this is the way it works. I just didn't know. And then so I tuned into her life, and I talked to her about writing a book and meeting some guy named Dale, and and she goes, well, I just met Dale and I am working on a book. And I said, and then I started seeing her traveling around the world. And she goes, me and Dale talked the other night about traveling around the world, looking after people's homes and their pets. And I'm like, are you serious? Like, I'm thinking I'm making this up, right? And so she goes, well, I really come and hoping that you could connect to someone. I'm like, what do you mean connect to someone? She goes, yeah, like get a message from somebody in spirit world. And I'm like, well, I'm pretty sure I can't do that. And she goes, well, try. I think you can. So, instantaneously, I'm thinking my logical brain gets in the way and I start thinking, okay. And then I sense this too a little bit. I go, well, maybe your grandmom, is your grandmom passed, right? And she goes, yes. I'm like, well, I feel, and then I described her, and all this. She goes, oh my God, that's my grandmom. And I'm like, what did she say? And I'm like, I don't know what she says. She goes, but that's not the person I'm hoping to hear from. I'm like, really? You're going to make me really work for this, aren't you? And she goes, yeah. She goes, there's someone else I really wanted to talk to. And I'm like, well, I don't know. And then boom, an image showed up in my mind. And it was a man wearing a baseball uniform. He looked about 15 or 16 years old, and there was a shed behind him. And he was standing there looking me in the eyes, and he bounced a baseball up and down in his hand, just like this, bouncing it up and down. I'm like, and that was all I saw. And then he turned around and walked in the shed. Like, I said, I don't know what this is, Jen, but this is so weird. But I see this young man. I told her, and she cried. She goes, that's the person I'm hoping to hear from. That was my best friend growing up in high school. And one night after a baseball game, he went home and he hung himself in the shed. And I've always wanted to know if he was okay or if if that he was around me. And I just really missed him. And I'm like, and I didn't really know how to answer the question because I didn't have any experience. I didn't have any wisdom. I didn't have anything to draw from in regard to understanding how to work with this. And I said, well, Jen, I feel like he's okay. I mean, I don't know. And at some point, my logical brain kicked in and I thought, I'm a mind reader. this is what this all is. Because I'm a male, I'm very masculine and very logical thinking person. This is what this is. I'm somehow able to get into people's heads, or they're thinking about somebody. I'm able to figure this out. And it was really tricky for me to kind of distinguish how this was even happening. And I just had passed it off as that. But and she went out and told, because she was a waitress, for God's sakes, she told three other waitresses, they told other waitresses. Next, I've got people messaging me, calling me, and I'm like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Next, I have like 3 or 4 people I'm seeing a week now. And I became very interested, and more had evolved and unfolded for me. And so I started to learn more about how this process was happening, but I still wasn't convinced that this was real. I just wasn't 100%. Even though what my dad said, I wasn't convinced.
Hmm. Well, and I think I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that because this really speaks to the fact that, we all doubt, we all question. And so even though we're having direct experiences in this way with the spirit world, our own mind can't wrap itself around it. Like it's hard to
Oh,
understand and you begin to question. At least I know for myself, there were times I even questioned my own sanity. And then it was like, am I really just making this up? Like, did this just really happen? Or is this wishful thinking? Or am I actually misleading people? And I'm like you, am I just reading their mind? It's a big concern. And it really speaks to one, I want to say the compassion and integrity that you have in doing this work, that your mind even goes there in the first place. But it just really speaks to the humanness of doing this work as well, because we all fall into those times of doubts and wonderment and confusion by our connections.
yeah. I mean, it's an amazing to receive information, but when you receive that information, I really question about where it was coming from, how I was getting it, how it was showing up in my mind, and where that was coming from. And I really thought, well, maybe this is coming from other people in their head, right? And because they were thinking about the things that they wanted to hear from, in a sense. And I thought, well, maybe I'm able to kind of get into that somehow. We're energy, right? And in a scientific terms, I could understand that maybe there's some like telepathy thing going on here. But it was a moment that I remember in my 20s where I was sitting with a guy in Calgary, and his name is Orhan. And he's a Muslim fellow, really nice guy from Bosnia Herzegovina. And we used to work together, play sports together, and I told him about all my little psychic adventures, and he hassled the bejeebus out of me, literally. And it was okay because he was a guy, guys do that, right? You give each other hard time sometimes, and he was really good at it. And but one day I was sitting on my computer at work in Calgary at an office furniture company doing AutoCAD and bills of materials for high-end office furniture for a company called Hayworth. And I'm typing on my computer, not thinking about anything, but let's say in a meditative state, just receptive, right? Because I'm in a zone. And then I hear Charlie, Charlie, Charlie. I'm like, and I stop. Like, why am I hearing Charlie in my head? Back to type meditative state again, right? Because I'm in a space, a mind space in my mind, and I hear Charlie, and I'm like, okay, there's something going on here. I'm like, and I look at Horian, and I'm thinking, he is thinking about Charlie, and they're going to be doing something on the weekend. I know it. This is what this is. So I turned and looked at Orion. I said, I got a really weird question for you, Orion, but this is going to sound really weird, but what the hell? Do you know a guy named Charlie? And are you doing anything with him? And he goes, no, I know a guy named Charlie, but I'm not doing anything with him. I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, I used to know a guy named Charlie, but he's deceased now. Like, what? And as soon as he said it, the picture came in my mind. And it was a bar sign in Calgary called the Town and Country Bar. And it was just a T and C, like a T and an and sign and C. And it just went blink. And it was like I've seen this sign before, but for whatever reason, when he mentioned that he knew this guy Charlie that he worked with, that bar sign flashed in my head. I'm like, that's so weird. I just saw the Town and Country Bar sign. He goes, what did you say? I said, I just saw the Town and Country Bar sign because that's the last place he was seen alive. I'm like, what? I mean, and I'm like, and then I start to see this house, and there was a backside entrance, and there were stairs going to the basement. And I saw three shadow figures behind him. And I saw him walking down. I felt a blunt force trauma to the back of my head. And I was like, oh, and then I asked him, I said, well, what do you know about going into a house, into the basement, the backside, like an apartment in the basement, with steps going down? And I said, do you know anything about the involvement of people that were involved? Because I don't know anything. It's an unsolved murder. I'm like, okay. I said, do you know anything about the house? No, that's all I heard. He was last seen at the country bar, and that's all I heard, that he was murdered. And I don't know anymore. And he got a little freaked out. I was freaked out because I was like, okay, well, did that come to me because he was thinking about it? But if he was thinking about it, why wouldn't he understand being behind the house, having stairs going in the apartment of the house? And I described the house, and he was adamant. He wasn't even in the country when this man was murdered. He thought I was accusing of murder for a minute. And I'm like, no. I said, I just need to know, do you know this? No. So he goes, okay, this is not cool. Who put you up to this? Who told you this? And I'm like, nobody's told me this. Nobody put me up to this. I just need to know if you know about this house, because I need to know if this is coming from your head or where this is coming from. And he said, no. And we agreed to drop it, and he stopped hassling me. And it was a really weird moment in my life because I didn't know what was happening still, right? So
Understandably.
a couple weeks later, I picked up the Calgary Sun paper. And the reason I picked it up is because I was a wee bit of a hockey fan back in the day, and I was following the Flames because I lived in Calgary. So I was kind of a wee bit of a Flames fan, but not so much anymore. But back in the day, I was, because I went to a few games, etc. So I picked up the paper, and I didn't always do that. But I picked up the paper to look at the hockey score. I'm flipping through, and there just happened to be an unsolved murder case in the paper. And it was about a guy named Achari, who was nicknamed Charlie, who was found deceased at a house in the southeastern, part of Calgary. But where he was last seen was at the Town and Country Bar, and they talked about where he worked and all this. And I was like, this can't be this. This has to be the same guy. So Orion comes on, and I put the paper down, and I had him go through the whole story. And I said, listen, you remember that little conversation we had? He's like, no, not really. I like baloney. I said BS, but we'll say baloney here. So anyway, I was just like, you remember this? I know you do. Remember the part where I told you about the house? And they had a picture and a description of the house and all this. He goes, yeah, I remember you saying that. I said, Orion, tell me the truth. Did you know about this house? And he said, no. And I grilled him a little bit deeper. I said, did you know about this house? Like, you had to know about this house. And because it came into me, I saw it as clear as day. I saw the entrance, the picture they have, etc. He goes, Sean, I do not know. What is it going to take for you to believe me? I didn't know anything about this house. All I heard was he was at the Town and Country Bar and they found him murdered somewhere at his home somewhere, but I didn't know what his home looked like or where it was. And I said, well, and I said, can you swear on your kids' lives or your wife's life? And he's like, sure, I can do this. And so anyway, he says, why is this so important to you? I said, Orion, this is going to sound really weird, but I'm not sure if I'm a mind reader. And I swear to God, this person that communicated to me that day seemed like a person. And they were telling me a story and they were showing me images about this story. And if it's not in your head and you weren't thinking about it and you didn't know, that means it's not coming from you. It's coming from somewhere else. And he said, man, that was nowhere in my head. I swear to God, it was nowhere in my head anywhere. I never knew about this at all. And he says, are you going to drop it? And I said, yeah, I would. And he says, and I asked him, like, how did you know this guy? He goes, well, I worked with him at the airport 8 years ago. And he said his name was Achari. He didn't tell me his name was Achari. He says, but that was too weird of a name to call him. So we just nicknamed him Charlie. And he was a Fijian fellow, right? Named Charlie. And so anyway, that was the moment but even though I was already doing connections for people, and I wasn't, I was doing the best I could and I was receiving a lot of validation of things, but everything that I was giving people was things that they knew, things that they could validate, that they remember. This is the first piece of information that somebody didn't know. And it boggled my mind. Like, there's just no way, if it's not in his head and he didn't know, it can't come from somebody that doesn't know something. It's coming from a person. This person has a personality. This person has a way of describing things. And I was able to distinguish that this was coming from a spirit. And it was like almost a light went off in my head in that moment. It was like all of a sudden I knew what I will say, a new language. And I understood the language of communication. I understood what clairvoyance was. I understood what clairsentient was, what clairaudience was, claircognizance. I didn't have the words to describe those things, but I knew the mechanics of it all. And I knew how spirit communicates. And I knew if I could create space in my mind and be mindful for short periods of time, I would be able to receive pieces of information for people. And so I continued to do it. And when I started to move forward in my mediumship at that point, I was really engaged in trying to understand it deeper, understand the language greater, understand how they can communicate better and greater. And it was just amazing. Like, just more and more things happened that were just so profound that just no way it could happen. And it was just, all I can say was just, it was inspiring to me to be part of it. And just the validations and the stuff that would come through inspired me to keep going and to keep learning more and to keep developing and keep growing as a medium and spirit talker. And today I have my own course, Spirit Talker Tribe, and
Yes.
I have the book Spirit Talker of the TV show. I have an oracle card deck. I never ever set out in life thinking that, hey, I'm going to be a medium that gets out in the world and publishes a book, puts a card deck out, gets with Heyo. So I'm going to have a TV show in Canada. Never thought in a million years that this would be my life.
Right. Right. What a really profound moment. And what I love also about that, as you said, up until then, you were having the feedback, you were getting the validation, and there was no way, there was no source for you to validate it. And that being said, but that the universe still showed up, that spirit still brought it forward and gave you the paper to say, look, this is real. And, you know, those moments when it just, and I've had them for myself where it's just a matter of, you cannot argue this. There isn't that was like, there's a moment that comes in, I think, every medium's life that just solidifies this truth of what is actually taking place. And it's anyone can try to say otherwise, but I know what I've witnessed. I know what I've experienced. I've had those, you know, experiences there where you have no way to back anything up until later on, and all of a sudden you look back and go, oh my gosh, that really was communication. I wasn't making that up. And really profound. And like you said, you know, here you are, that's, you know, and really we could even say a short time later. I mean, it, you know, we look at, you know, how quickly things have evolved, and really where your purpose in doing this work has, you know, taken you. And I mean, the impact and the help and that you are being to so many people is just, I mean, phenomenal. I'm just so excited about what else could be possible. You know, let this be the beginning of something even more for you, and of course for everyone. One of the things I'm really curious about, Sean, in as part of this event, we have mediums that are, you know, exploring, they're developing, they're learning. There's some individuals who are out and practicing professionally, while there are others who are still, you know, trying to understand their abilities and spirit communication. I'm wondering, what advice do you have for mediums who may be resistant or a little bit uncertain about taking that step forward? The vast majority of mediums have a deep call. We just really want to help other people. We feel compelled to help others. But what advice do you have for the individual who is still hesitant or in some resistance around that?
Well, what I would say is, you know, this is deeply connected to my indigenous culture too, is that, you know, all of our ceremonies include speaking to our ancestors, you know, speaking to the creator. And, you know, whatever words you use, you know, talk to spirit and say, help me to help other people. Send me people that I can serve, and give messages of validation and stuff through. Tell them what you're available for. Say, I'm available to receive, you know, clairvoyance, clairsentience, clairaudience, claircognizance. Help me to understand these abilities greater so that I can give these
Lower
as a
that.
gift to other people. What I would
Oh,
say is just, you know, that's all right.
that's okay. I'm
But
just going to mute her out. There we go. There we go.
yeah,
Yeah.
but so speak to spirit. Tell him what you're available for. Tell him that that invitation. Invite them to help you to understand this greater. Invite them to guide you, lead you, direct you, send the right people to you, ask them to help you find the right messages with the right people. You know, speak to them, tell them what you need in regards to give you the resources so that you can step more wholeheartedly into it. And then when you are given the opportunities, then listen. Listen to what spirit has to say to you. And I'm not saying just listen with your ears. Listen with your clairvoyance, listen with your heart, listen with your body, listen, you know, through all of your senses, your psychic senses, through clairvoyance, clairsentience, clairaudience, claircognizance, clairalience, you know, listen in every way. And whatever comes to you, work with it, even if you don't understand it. Not everything is meant for us to understand. It's meant for us to give for the person.
Oh,
We're the medium, we're the middle people.
mhm.
And I like to say that through the process of mediumship and people that are coming through with spirit messages, they leave little breadcrumbs. And you may only get one piece of the breadcrumb with one aspect of a message that you may see unfold after 3 or 4 breadcrumbs. And you may not see the whole picture, but they're working with you in such a way to give you the image, you know, the message here and the message there. And then after 3 or 4 breadcrumbs, you're like, oh, I know where this is going. I know what's happening here. I know where they're going with this. And like, okay, I know. Now you're in sync or in line. You're aligning with them in the message that they're trying to give. And I'll tell you as an example, because I mean, as an Indigenous person, I like to teach in stories, and I'm going to share a story with you of how that has unfolded for me in so many ways that are super cool in my life. And again, you just have to let go. And I'll tell you about 2 stories particularly. One story was a long time ago, and you can watch this on the TV show Spirit Talker. I was in Acadia First Nation in Yarmouth, Nova Scotia on season 1. And anyway, I'm reading a lady in the audience because there was about 120 people there, and I'm doing random spirit messages because Spirit Talker season 1 was a live audience setting. Then COVID happened, then everything changed and we couldn't do live settings anymore. And I connected to a lady who lost her daughter. And I think she had told me her name. And I got to see her, and she looked like she lost a lot of weight. Very pretty girl. And I felt to her age, I could tell that she was probably around 37 or something like this. She had children that someone else was raising, etc. And I could feel where cancer was on her body and my own body. And these are all great validating things. But then she stopped, and her mom was crying, receiving the message. And she shows me something so odd that I'm a little shocked by. And I don't know how to deal with it. I don't know how to use it. I've never seen this before. So here I am on film. There's 3 or 4 cameras pointed at me. There's a live audience, and I'm seeing something that puts me in my weird, uncomfortable zone. And she showed me she was wearing a shirt when she first appeared. She takes it off. She's wearing just a bra, and then her bosoms grew. I'm like, okay, what the heck am I going to do with this? I have no idea what this means. Like, I'm not here. I'm having an argument in my head with her. Like, I can't say this to your mom. Like, if I say this to your mom, I mean, I'm in front of people here. I can't be talking about you being shirtless in your bra and your breasts growing, for God's sakes. I mean, that's not where I want to go with this. And this is not where I think that we need to go with this. And I'm having this like dilemma. And to me, it seems like an eternity, but really it's a very short period of time. I said, okay, I'm going to say it. So I said, ma'am, I'm so sorry. I don't mean you disrespect. I don't mean your daughter any disrespect. But for whatever reason, she feels like it's important that I share with you that she is taking her shirt off. She's standing here in a bra, and she wants me to emphasize how nice her boobs look in the bra. And she put out a big bolt of laugh, and she goes, oh my God, it's her. It's really her. And these 2 ladies that were sitting with her, she was the only one standing. 2 of these other ladies beside her stand up and they go, oh my God, it's our sister. And I said, okay, well, this obviously is big. I have no idea what this means, but you do. And they tell me the story that, she always, before her health went downhill, she'd always wish for larger bosoms or something like that. And, she was battling cancer for a long period of time, and she struggled with that. And she always complained about her boobs and stuff like this. So in the back room of the funeral home before the service, the mom and 2 daughters took her shirt off, put a new bra on her, and stuffed it. And they were going to send her to the spirit world with a new rack, let's say. And they didn't tell a soul, no one. And they're doing the service and they're crying, but they're laughing because they know that if they watch her in the casket at the front of the church, that there's this inside joke between her and the 2 sisters, the mom and 2 sisters, that they've done this, but no one knows. And they've never talked about it. And so here I am in front of an audience, and this is like, it was like the mom was laughing and smiling. And after, I spoke to one of the daughters after, and she goes, I haven't seen my mom laugh in years since she's passed. I haven't seen that. You don't know how much that's helped her in saying that. Here I was thinking I was saying the most awkward, weird thing in that I could ever say to anyone. And it was the most integral piece of evidence to them that she was communicating. And it wasn't something we're thinking about. It's not something they were talking about. It was something that came through that I had to describe to the best of my ability. And yeah, the mom, I think like the daughter sent me a message like months later and said, Mom has not stopped smiling, and she's still smiling. I was like, so just knowing that her daughter came through and had that message, and it was just life changing literally for her and for me too, because it was a lesson to me about trust.
Yes. And it can be the most random things. And I know for myself, it doesn't make sense sometimes, but it's also not supposed to make sense for to us. We're just simply the messenger. Our job, so to speak, is to share what it is that we are receiving, what they're telling us, what they're showing us. And those become the defining moments for the sitter in those, to say, oh my gosh, that really is my loved one. And it becomes one of, again, the most healing of moments that take place as well. And so, the funniest things, I mean, oh my gosh, we could sit and swap stories over the most ridiculous, silly things that spirit does. But you also said this too, and I love this because it's so, so true, is that spirit wants us to succeed in doing this. So they will do whatever they possibly can to help us. We need to just ask for what assistance we need, ask for the ways in which we would like to receive this, and begin to understand that, they're really, as I always say, they're just people without bodies. These are just individuals who we can talk to. They understand, and just like we're meeting a new friend, we can have the same kind of conversation with someone in spirit. So I love that you shared that as well, Sean.
Mhm.
Now we have, again, and again, I want to honor your time, of course, as we're coming up to, our goes by so quickly, so quickly. The other part of it is we also have a group of individuals who are a part of this program, who are also dealing with immense loss, and those they're struggling, of course, in moving forward and in being able to understand this connection to the other side. What insight would you have for those who are going through their grief journey right now as they're yearning and longing for this connection?
Well, literally, our people are just thoughts away. And I think, if I was to give anybody any piece of advice, it would be just talk to them, love them where they are. Don't feel like because they don't have a body in the physical form that they don't have a spirit body or a spirit that doesn't drop in or visit you off and on all the time. And in the beginning, when you lose somebody, sometimes the spirits will look for unique ways to get your attention through a symbol or a sign or a message in some unique way that just couldn't happen. You're home alone and the dime falls in midair on the floor, or the feather, floats to you from some weird place. The hummingbird comes and looks you straight in the eye. There's little signs of spirit communicating, and it doesn't always have to be, hey, I'm right here with you. It could be another way to say, hey, I'm right here with you. Be open to those possibilities, that can happen. And just tell your spirit people, just say, I'm really grateful that you're around me, but I'm giving you permission to do little things to remind me that you're there. I'm available for that, you know, and just continue to talk to them. And when you notice when you're grieving, shift your grief, and it takes time to work through grief. There's no, quick way, short way, or, there's just your way. And what I would say is, take your time with it. And when you notice the heaviness of grief when you've lost people, shift it. Can you shift it to something that was joyful, happy, a good memory, as opposed to the heaviness of the sickness, the illness, the loss, the feeling of separation? What about the feelings of connections that you have? And what did that look like? I could think about my dad and the times that we went fishing. Even now, if I go out on my side by side, even though he passed in 1987, I still imagine my dad sometimes sits with me. And I'm out driving around the woods, and I can even imagine in my mind that he's cursing at me, trying to drink his beer because I'm like probably bouncing all over the place, driving like a madman. And then, I just say, and so when I'm out fishing and things like this, I think of him. And sometimes I'll just have a little word with him. Hey, Dad, it's really nice for you to be here with me today. I include them in my life still. I have a relationship with them still where they are. And I know they're having a relationship with me too from where they are as well. It's reciprocal. And you have to work at it and keep going and keep doing it and shifting, whenever you notice a heavy thought or a heavy memory, shift it to a happy one. And the more you continually shift your heavy thoughts to happy thoughts, eventually the way our brains work and the way they wire themselves, we will only go to the happy thoughts. We only go to the happy memories. And then our grief is shifted from this heavy and hard place to a lighthearted, loving, connected space. So that's what I would tell people is that.
Mm. So beautiful, and such sage advice. Thank you so very much. I just want to double check in with those who are joining here live online with us in this space. Any questions, if there's anything at all, we have a chat available. You guys can go ahead and just, if you have a question for Sean, anything that came up based on something he shared here this evening that you would like to comment on. Have a lot of excitement, people saying they're super excited, of course, to be in this space with you. Oh, yeah, I'm going to say, Amanda, no problem. Apologizing for the unmuted moment. That's perfectly fine. That happens. We're all human.
Of course we
We're
are,
all,
yeah.
oh, yeah, exactly. Exactly. Just kind of curious if there's anyone here that has something. I know I've got curious people here, so just it'll
If
take a
somebody
moment.
wants to ask me a question, I'm open to a
Yeah,
question about anything in regards to like
anything.
psychic abilities or development or growth and things like that. Just put up your hand
Yeah.
or unmute your thing and let ask me. Feel free to ask me because I'm open to that.
Here we go. Susan is saying, I love the stories about flying. When I was a kid, I had those too, and no one believed me.
Oh yes, I see that. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, that's see, it's amazing. And I think there too, just to understand how easily it is for us to experience some of the very things, and yet we often feel very isolated, misunderstood, or in some sense with it as well. So it's beautiful. So Veronica is asking, do you have advice on how to be more confident in your mediumship?
I would say just do your mediumship with an open heart. Just trust spirit, trust how you're going to understand the message, even if you don't understand, work with it anyway, and just step into it. Step into it as much as you need to go into it. Just step into it. Sometimes, even if you don't get it or they don't understand right away, you can say, well, remember that I said it because maybe this is something they want me to get your attention with at a later time. Maybe this will make sense in a little bit of time. And don't feel like you have to understand it all and validate it in the moment if it can't be done. Sometimes things unfold in time. And you have to give people that space and time for that to allow to happen. And many times when I get messages from people later after they see me, it was like, oh my God, Sean, I couldn't understand this. I didn't understand that. And as soon as it left 5 minutes, it was in my car. It was like, oh my God, how could I have forgotten this? Right.
Yes.
But, give it with a whole heart, just give it with unconditional love and a whole heart and just trust the process and let go of the expectations. And I don't have the egotistical part of my brain that says, oh, I got to be right about every single thing. I got to know this. And, I let go of thinking to have to be right. They're right. And I just trust how they communicate that message to me, whether you understand it now or it's something you understand later. But I still give it with an open and whole heart and just trust the whole process.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. One of the things when, I'm delivering something and it doesn't make sense the moment, I think it's really to understand that when people are receiving these messages, they can be incredibly overwhelmed. And it's like they're hearing you, but things don't necessarily register or the memory isn't available because they can be emotionally overwhelmed in that moment. So one of the things I always say, you know what, just go ahead and put it into your back pocket, take it home with you. Your loved one's going to make sure that it makes sense. And like you said, it's like, maybe it's a week later or it'll be, sometimes 2 years later, somebody will come back and say, do you remember that session? I didn't understand what it was, but now I do. I understand what they were talking about. So even though we are doing readings for people and we understand our loved ones are a part of our past, sometimes they give us messages of things that haven't necessarily played out yet either. So it may not be able to be validated in the moment. So I love what Sean says. Just do it with an open heart. Just do it so unconditionally because yes, spirit is always right. It's amazing, amazing. Coming in here now, any tips on for meditation?
I would say, well, there's different types of meditation. And I think I do have an exercise in my book, Spirit Talker. One of the ones I give in the book itself is to take an object and stare at the object and then stare away at a blank space, at a table or what have you, and still hold the image of the object in your mind because you're training your brain to receive and create an image within the brain itself and hold it. Because a lot of the times when spirit gives us something, you kind of have to delve into it and dig into it and kind of let it unfold as you see it and feel it out. So the greater that you train your brain by taking objects meditatively and then holding them in your mind for just brief moments of time and presence, and then feeling it out, vibing it out. And you can do this with people out in public. What I would say is like, go out and see somebody sitting on a park bench or somebody at Tim Hortons sitting at a table. Don't look at them, but just for an instance, stare out the window. And what do you remember about them? Hold the image of them in your mind. Just be mindful and present and feel them out. How do they feel? What's their personality like? What are they going through today? You don't have to say anything to them. But by being meditative with the people that you meet and the objects that you see in life and holding space for it in your mind, you're going to create and develop greater clairvoyance. You're going to create a better awareness and an ability to hold the images that spirit gives you so you can work with them greater. So that would be a great development tool meditatively in an exercise that you could work with and do so that you can improve your clairvoyance.
Oh, that's excellent. That is so excellent. Excellent. All right, we'll take one more question coming in here from Heather. Heather is asking, do you think there is a link between trauma and being empathic? And does this empathic ability lead to or help develop mediumship abilities?
I don't know if I can answer that question, a link between trauma and being empathetic. I think I think empathy is something that is within our spirit. And it's through the many experiences that we've had, not only from this one lifetime, but the many lifetimes that we've lived. And it's innate within our spirit empathy. And I think when you connect to people and you can be empathetic, it's not because you've had a lot of memories of trauma in your life that you can relate. But what I would say is that it could be many traumas you have been through in many lifetimes, and somehow psychically you can relate. That there could be a connection with trauma, but it could be just from the many experiences you had through the many lifetimes that help you become as empathetic as you are so that you can connect to people greater. But I wouldn't say go out and suffer so that you can be more empathetic to be able to serve people better. Um, but it does help
Yeah.
to have wisdom through experience.
Yeah.
And
I sorry to interrupt you. I love how you
yeah,
say that. It's the wisdom through the experience. The spirit will often use that wisdom in as a bias or as something in helping you to connect with your people as well. And I know for myself, being someone who did have move through a lot of trauma, and I know that for me, my times of disassociation actually opened up my connection to the spirit world. There were in those times when I would be triggered or something in an overwhelmed state that I went into what Sean was saying earlier, that meditative or deeply mindful state. And then and that's when I was connecting with spirit. So there is, and I'm not saying go through trauma so you can disassociate in order to have the experience, but is there a connection to it? For some of us, absolutely there is. But I really, I think it's also important just to know that your curiosity about mediumship can also be an invitation where spirit is wanting you to recognize that you do have some abilities here as well.
mhm.
So good. So good. All right. Oh my gosh. Well, Sean, can I just from the bottom of my heart say thank you so much. I know in taking this time for you in middle of, everything you have going on in your busy schedule and for taking the time out to be here with us here tonight for this conversation. It's been so greatly appreciated. Everybody, I love the comments coming in saying thank you. Thank you. You guys are so very welcome. Maritimers rock.
Yeah,
Yes, yes,
we're all
they
right.
do. We're not bad here in Western Canada either,
Uh,
just saying.
yeah.
Well, it was, and they're saying so nice, yes, and such a beautiful story. And yeah, the book is amazing. So if you guys don't have his book, I really would encourage you to get it. It's called Spirit Talker, and a reminder that you can catch his show on APTN, and of course look for him at future Hay House events, because I have a feeling that we're going to be seeing more and more of Sean showing up for Spirit in all kinds of beautiful ways. So God bless. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in and being a part of this conversation. Sean, it's just an absolute pleasure.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the invitation, and I hope there's something that I shared tonight that inspired, every person here that was listening. So I'm really grateful that you were here to listen. And because I mean, it's no sense in having wisdom if you don't share it. So that's why I'm here. Because this isn't about me. This is about all of us growing. This is about all of us serving people in a greater way so that we can be the most and greatest effective spirit talkers or mediums that we can be. Because each of us are individuals and we can't heal the whole world by ourselves. But together, all of us doing the work can help heal the world and make it a greater and better space. So thank you.
Yes, yes. Beautiful, beautiful. Oh my gosh. So I just, if there was a mic, I think we just need to drop it. Like, let's just, it's a mic drop moment.
Okay. Well, have a good night,
All right.
everyone.
Good night,
We're
everybody.